Chapter 1. Imagine yourself walking through the English countryside on a quiet morning where ancient stone walls wind across fields and gardens like gentle ribbons of history. These weathered boundaries have stood for centuries, each stone placed by hands that understood the patient art of building with nature rather than against it. The story of garden walls begins not with grand estates, but with humble necessity. In a time when protecting precious plants from wandering livestock could mean the difference between plenty and hunger. Chapter 2. In the earliest days of medieval Europe, the concept of a garden wall was beautifully simple. Picture a monastery garden in the 10th century, where monks tended their herbs and vegetables within rough stone enclosures. These walls typically rose 4 to 6 feet high, just enough to deter a curious goat or hungry deer, yet low enough for a gardener to peer over and survey their domain. The stones were often field stone, gathered from the surrounding countryside during the slow clearing of agricultural land. Chapter 33. These medieval craftsmen worked with whatever stone their local landscape provided, and this created a wonderful diversity of wall styles across Europe. In the rolling hills of the Cotswolds, limestone emerged as a prized material. When freshly quarried, Cotswold stone was remarkably soft and workable, allowing masons to shape it with simple tools. As it weathered, it developed that distinctive golden hue that still catches the light in village gardens today. Chapter 4. The beauty of Cotswold construction lay in its dry stone technique. Imagine the careful selection of each stone, the way a skilled mason would turn a piece over in their hands, feeling for the perfect fit. No mortar was needed when the stones were placed with such precision that they supported each other through their own weight and careful positioning. The walls had a subtle batter, a gentle inward slope that helped them stand firm against wind and weather. Chapter 5. Meanwhile, in Yorkshire, builders worked with the local gritstone, creating those distinctive dry stone walls that seem to emerge naturally from the landscape. These walls required through stones, long pieces that extended completely through the wall's thickness, binding the two faces together like stone stitches. A properly built Yorkshire wall, with its careful coursing and strategic placement of these binding stones, could stand for centuries without a single grain of mortar. Chapter 6. But where mortar was used, medieval builders developed their own gentle alchemy. Traditional lime mortar was a patient creation, made from lime putty and sand in a ratio of roughly 1 part lime to 3 parts sand. The lime putty itself was aged like fine wine, sometimes for months, improving its workability and bonding strength. Picture the mason's yard, where vats of this creamy putty waited, slowly developing the perfect consistency for building walls that would endure for generations. Chapter 7. The preparation of lime mortar was almost meditative in its deliberate pace. Limestone was burned in kilns to create quicklime, which was then carefully slaked with water in a process that generated considerable heat. Once cooled and aged, this lime putty could be mixed with local sand to create mortar that would set slowly and gently, allowing stones to settle into their perfect positions. Chapter 8. Medieval builders were wise to the rhythms of the seasons in ways we might find quaint today. Winter construction was generally avoided, as frost could severely damage uncured lime mortar, causing walls to crumble come spring. Instead, building seasons followed the natural calendar, with major construction beginning in late spring and concluding before the first hard frosts. This seasonal approach created its own peaceful rhythm, where communities would plan their building projects around the weather's reliable patterns. Chapter 9. The monastic gardens of medieval Europe were perhaps the finest examples of functional wall building. These enclosed spaces served multiple purposes beyond simple boundaries. Picture a monastery garden wall with small niches built into its thickness, designed to house skep hives for the community's bees. Other walls featured integrated supports for espalier fruit trees, their branches trained along the warm, south-facing stone surfaces where they could capture every ray of precious sunlight. Chapter 10. As we move into the later medieval period, garden walls began to reflect not just necessity, but status. In feudal society, a walled garden became a symbol of prosperity and permanence. The higher and more elaborate the wall, the greater the statement of the owner's position. Yet even these grander walls maintained a connection to their humble origins, built with the same patient techniques and local materials that had served cottage gardens for generations. Chapter 11. The arrival of the Renaissance brought new influences from Italy, where villa gardens showcased innovative wall designs. Italian builders introduced decorative coping stones, those carefully shaped caps that crowned garden walls with elegant profiles. They also created integrated niches for statuary, transforming functional barriers into galleries for displaying art. These ideas traveled slowly northward, carried by merchants, scholars, and craftsmen who had witnessed the beauty of Italian gardens. Chapter 12. By the 16th century, these Italian influences had begun to reshape garden wall construction across northern Europe. English estate walls started featuring more sophisticated decorative elements, though always adapted to local materials and traditions. A wall might feature the same sturdy limestone construction as its medieval predecessors, but crowned with carefully carved coping stones that caught and reflected light in pleasing ways. Chapter 13. The introduction of brick-making techniques from the Low Countries in the 15th century created yet another chapter in wall construction history. Bricks could be molded to precise shapes and fired to consistent hardness, allowing for different types of decorative possibilities. Some builders began creating walls with alternating courses of stone and brick, creating pleasing patterns that were both functional and beautiful. These techniques were particularly popular in eastern England, where local clay provided excellent brickmaking materials. Chapter 14. The social significance of these walled gardens cannot be understated. In an age when most people lived close to subsistence, a protected garden space represented security, prosperity, and the luxury of planning for the future. The walls themselves became gathering places where families would walk in the evening, sheltered from wind and curious eyes. Children learned to identify different stones and mortar types, knowledge passed down through generations of local building traditions. Chapter 15. As centuries passed, the purpose of garden walls gradually shifted from purely functional to increasingly ornamental. What began as simple barriers to protect vegetables and herbs evolved into carefully designed landscape features that framed views and created intimate garden rooms. Yet the fundamental techniques remained largely unchanged, testament to the wisdom of those early medieval builders who understood how to work in harmony with stone and weather. Chapter 16. Today, when we encounter these ancient garden walls in our walks through historic landscapes, we're witnessing the handiwork of countless craftsmen who built not for speed or profit, but for permanence and beauty. Each stone was placed with consideration for the stones around it. Each mortar joint smoothed with the patience of someone who understood that their work would outlive them by centuries. These walls remind us of a time when building was not just construction, but a form of quiet artistry, practiced by people who knew that the most enduring creations come from working slowly, carefully, and in harmony with the natural world around us. In their weathered surfaces and sturdy foundations, we find not just history, but a gentle invitation to slow down and appreciate the timeless beauty of simple, well-crafted things.